The oldest letter was dated March 9th, 3 years ago. I know because she wrote the date in the top right corner the way people do when they're writing something they want to remember. Dear Ethan, it started. I sat with you at the park today for 2 hours, and you told me about the girl from the bookstore, and I laughed in all the right places. And I want you to know that when I got home, I sat in my car for 15 minutes because I couldn't make my hands stop shaking. That was letter 1. There were 42 more. I found them on a Tuesday in a shoebox in her closet while looking for a leash for her dog. She was in Michigan, visiting her parents. She'd be home in 7 days, and I had just read the thing my best friend had spent 3 years making sure I would never see. I should back up, because none of this makes sense without the rest. My name is Ethan, I'm 34, and I design logos and brand packages for small companies, which means I sit in my apartment in front of 2 monitors and move rectangles around until someone pays me. I work remote, which sounds like freedom, until you realize freedom is just another word for nobody checks on you. I moved to this side of the city 2 years ago because the rent was cheaper, and because Megan, my girlfriend at the time, said the neighborhood had character. It did. We broke up 6 months ago anyway. 2 years together, and she left on a Wednesday. Took the good pillows and the toaster that actually worked. I kept the apartment and the quiet, and I told myself the quiet was what I'd been missing. I'm good at telling myself things. I'm less good at believing them past midnight. I should talk about Nadia. Nadia Kowalski. 32, editor at a small press that publishes original travel guides. Brown hair she ties up with whatever's available, which I've seen include a pencil, a phone charger cable, and once a twist tie from a bread bag. She drinks her coffee so light it's almost milk. She says the word apparently more than anyone I've ever met, and she laughs with her whole body, this full lean-back thing where she puts one hand on her chest like she's trying to keep something from escaping. I've known her for 4 years. She's my best friend. And until 40 minutes ago, that sentence didn't come with an asterisk. We met at Rosewood Dog Park on a Sunday morning in April 4 years ago. I had Charlie then. Charlie was a mutt brown and white, some kind of beagle mix who didn't like other dogs much, but tolerated the ones who didn't try too hard. He was 11 years old, and his back legs were going, but he still wanted the park every morning. He'd sit in the grass near the bench and watch the other dogs run, and you could see him remembering what his legs used to do. Nadia had Goose. Golden Retriever, 3 at the time, 7 now. Goose was the kind of dog who loved everyone without asking permission first. He'd come barreling across the park at full speed and crash into whoever was closest, tail going so fast it blurred. Charlie hated it. The first time Goose came running at him, Charlie just sat down and looked at me like, "Are you going to handle this or should I?" I didn't handle it. Nadia did. She came running after Goose yelling, "Goose, no, Goose, leave it, Goose." And by the time she got to our bench, she was out of breath and apologizing and holding Goose by the collar, and her hair was falling out of whatever she'd used to tie it up that morning. "I'm so sorry," she said. "He has no boundaries." "It's fine," I said. "My dog also has no boundaries. His boundary is everyone should leave him alone." She laughed. Not the polite kind, the full, lean-back, hand-on-chest kind. And Charlie looked up at Goose, and Goose looked down at Charlie, and Goose licked Charlie's ear, and Charlie let him, which was the most generous thing Charlie had ever done for another living creature. That was it. That was how it started. A golden retriever with no concept of personal space and a beagle mix who made one exception. We started sitting on the same bench every morning. It wasn't planned. It just happened the way good things do, without anyone deciding. She'd bring 2 coffees from the shop on Elm, one almost white for her and one black for me, and she figured out my order after asking once. I noticed that. I noticed and didn't think about what noticing meant. We talked about nothing important. Her job, my clients, the man who walked 4 Pomeranians at once and always looked like he was losing a war, the weather and her parents in Michigan, and my brother Marcus and his divorce. The shows we were watching, the food we were cooking. We talked about relationships, hers and mine, the way friends do. Honestly, without stakes. She told me about the guy she dated who pronounced quinoa as quinoa on a first date, and I told her about Megan's habit of rearranging my desk when I wasn't home. And we'd sit there on the bench watching Goose and Charlie, and the conversation would just run out naturally, the way a river gets shallow, and the silence that followed never felt wrong. It felt like the rest of the sentence. Charlie died 14 months ago. In his sleep, in his bed on Thursday morning, I called Nadia before I called my brother. She came over with Goose and sat on the floor next to me and didn't say it'll be okay, or he's in a better place, or any of the things people say when they don't know what else to say. She just sat there. Goose put his head on Charlie's bed and whimpered once, and Nadia put her hand on my shoulder, and we stayed like that for a long time. Nadia said I should. She said it gently. The way she says things she's thought about but doesn't want to push. I said I'd think about it. I didn't think about it. Some spaces, when they empty out, you don't fill them. You just learn to walk around the shape of what used to be there. But I kept going to the park. Nadia asked if I wanted to walk Goose with her. I said yes, so we kept our bench and our coffees and our mornings. I just didn't have a dog anymore. That was the friendship. 4 years of bench time and bad coffee, and borrowed dog walks and phone calls, where neither of us wanted to hang up first, but neither of us said so. It was the easiest relationship in my life, which should have told me something. Now, the shoebox. Nadia's apartment is 12 minutes from mine. She asked me to dog-sit Goose while she visited her parents in Grand Rapids, 7 days. She gave me a key and a list of Goose's routines written on the back of a publisher's rejection letter, which I thought was funny. She said he needs his walk by 7, or he gets passive-aggressive, and I should know that passive-aggressive for Goose means standing in the kitchen staring at you without blinking. You'll be fine, she said. He loves you. He loves everyone. Not like he loves you, he's different with you. She said it fast, like she was already thinking about the next thing. Then she was gone. It was a Tuesday afternoon, day 3 of dog sitting, and Goose and I had settled into a rhythm. Walk, breakfast, he sleeps on the couch while I work at her kitchen table. Lunch, another walk, he puts his chin on my foot while I pretend to read. I was looking for his spare leash because the main one had a clip that was starting to stick. Nadia had said it was in her bedroom closet, top shelf in a bag. I opened the closet. The bag was there, so was a shoebox behind it. Plain white, no markings. I moved it to reach the bag, and the lid came off, and 43 letters spilled across the floor. They were handwritten, all of them, on different paper, different pens, some on notebook pages with the fringe still on the edge, some on good stationery, one on the back of a grocery list, all folded, all starting the same way. Dear Ethan. I sat on her bedroom floor with Goose standing next to me, his tail going slow and uncertain like he knew something was wrong, and I read the first one again. The one dated March 9th, 3 years ago. I sat with you at the park today for 2 hours, and you told me about the girl from the bookstore. And I laughed in all the right places, and I want you to know that when I got home, I sat in my car for 15 minutes, because I couldn't make my hands stop shaking. I remember that day, the bookstore girl, and the way she changed everything, without knowing it. Her name was Rena, and she worked at the register, and she'd recommended a novel to me, and I'd asked for her number, and she'd written it on the receipt. I told Nadia about it on the bench, like it was good news, like she'd want to know. She smiled, and said, "That's great, Ethan." And she said I should text Rena that night before I lost my nerve. I texted Rena that night. We went on 3 dates. It didn't go anywhere. I told Nadia that too, on the bench, and she handed me my coffee and said her loss, and we moved on. That was the day her hands were shaking in her car. I went through them in order. I don't know why. Part of me wanted to stop after the first one and put them back and close the closet and take Goose for his afternoon walk and pretend Tuesday was still Tuesday. But the handwriting pulled me through. Her handwriting is small and slanted left, the kind that looks like it's leaning into a wind, and every letter started with my name in that same careful hand, and my name looked different when she wrote it. Like it meant more than I'd ever thought it could. I didn't read all 43 that afternoon. I read maybe 10, enough to know. She wrote about our mornings, the coffee, the bench, the way I talked about Megan and how she'd go home afterward and stand in her kitchen and press her hands flat on the counter and breathe until the feeling passed. She wrote about Charlie dying, about watching me fall apart, about how she wanted to say something that day on my floor, but the words she had were the wrong shape for what I needed. She never sent them, and she never planned to. They were just hers, a place to put the things she couldn't say out loud. I put the letters back in the box. I put the box back on the shelf. I closed the closet door. I stood in Nadia's bedroom with my hands in my pockets, and Goose sitting at my feet looking up at me with that patient golden retriever face. And I did the math. 4 years of mornings, every coffee, every time she said her loss, or you deserve better, or I'm happy for you. All of that was real, and underneath all of it, running like a wire through every conversation we'd ever had, was this. I called Marcus. My brother is 40, divorced, lives 2 towns over in a house that's too big for one person, but he won't sell because he says the garage has good light. He's a high school history teacher and the kind of man who gives advice in the form of long pauses. I found something, I said. Found what? Letters. Nadia wrote me letters, 43 of them over 3 years. She never sent them. Marcus was quiet for a long time, long enough that I checked to see if the call dropped. Then he said, "Are they love letters?" "I don't know what they are." "You know what they are, Ethan." I sat down on Nadia's couch. Goose jumped up next to me, which I'm pretty sure he's not supposed to do, and leaned his full weight into my side, 70 pounds of warm golden retriever pressing into my ribs like he was trying to hold me together. "What do?" I said. Marcus made a sound, half laugh, half something else.
"You're asking the wrong person."
I had something good for 12 years and I couldn't figure out how to say so until she was packing boxes. He said it flat. No drama, just a fact the way you state a fact that's cost you more than you can calculate. I knew about Marcus's divorce. The broad strokes. He and Julie had been high school sweethearts, married at 26, split at 38. He'd told me once, late at night over whiskey, that the worst part wasn't the fighting. The worst part was realizing he'd loved her the whole time and had somehow never made her believe it. "I don't know what to do with this," I said. He said, "I know the feeling." We hung up. I put my phone on the coffee table. Goose was still pressed against me, his head on my thigh, breathing slow and steady like a metronome. I sat there for a while, I don't know how long. Outside the window the light was doing that late afternoon thing where everything turns gold and then doesn't. I got up, clipped the spare leash to Goose's collar, walked to the park. Our bench was empty. It usually is on Tuesday evenings. I sat down in my spot, the right, the side I always sit on. Nadia sits on the left. She tucks one leg underneath her and holds her coffee with both hands even when it's not cold, and she watches Goose run, and sometimes she closes her eyes and tips her face up toward whatever sun there is. I sat there alone. Goose lay in the grass at my feet, in the same spot where Charlie used to sit, and he watched the other dogs the way Charlie used to watch them, patient and undemanding. 4 days until she comes home, and I had 4 days to decide what the shoebox changes, if it changes anything, if I'm allowed to let it. The bench felt wider, with just me on it. I could feel the empty space on the left side like a draft through an open window, and I kept thinking about her handwriting, how my name looked in her hand, how she'd written 43 letters to a person sitting right next to her and never once let the pen slip into her voice. Goose lifted his head and looked toward the parking lot, ears forward the way he does when he hears a car that sounds like Nadia's. It wasn't her car. He put his head back down. I knew I'd go back to the closet. I knew I'd read the rest of them. I just didn't know yet what I'd do with what they said. I went back to the closet on Wednesday morning before the sun was fully up. Goose was still asleep on the couch, one paw hanging off the edge, twitching like he was chasing something in a dream. I stood in Nadia's bedroom doorway and told myself I was just going to read a few more, get some kind of context, understand what I was holding before I decided what to do with it. That's what I told myself. But I was already sitting on the floor with the shoebox in my lap before the thought finished forming. I didn't read them in order this time. I spread them across the carpet and read by instinct. Whichever one my hand went to, that's the one I opened. The early letters had this quality I couldn't name at first. Then I figured it out. She was performing. Writing the way you write when you think someone might eventually read it, even if you've told yourself they won't. The handwriting was neater, the sentences were careful. She edited herself mid-thought, crossed out words and replaced them with safer ones. The second letter was dated April of that first year. She wrote about a Tuesday morning at the park when I told her about a client who wanted a logo that looked like trust but edgier. She said she laughed so hard she inhaled her coffee, and it came out her nose and she was mortified. Then she wrote, "I keep making a list of reasons this is a bad idea. You're not over your ex. We see each other every day, you call me buddy sometimes, and I hate it, and I can't tell you I hate it. But the list keeps getting shorter and the reasons keep getting weaker, and I think eventually I'm just going to be left standing there, with nothing between me and the truth." I put that one down and picked up one from the middle of the stack. The middle letters were different. The handwriting was looser. More pressure on the pen, deeper grooves in the paper. The performances had stopped. She wasn't writing for anyone anymore, not even a hypothetical future reader. She was just writing because the feeling needed somewhere to go. There was one from November, over a year in. She wrote about the night I called her at midnight, drunk at a bar downtown because a work dinner had turned into something else and Megan wasn't picking up her phone. Nadia came and got me. She drove my car because I couldn't, and she took me back to her apartment because mine was farther, and I was talking too much to be left alone. I slept on her couch. Goose slept on the floor next to me. She put a glass of water and 2 aspirin on the coffee table, and I woke up the next morning with a blanket I didn't remember pulling over myself. I remembered all of that. I remembered thinking what a good friend she was, what an easy, uncomplicated, good friend. Her letter about that night said, "You fell asleep mid-sentence." Something about how the bartender's tie reminded you of a flag. You were talking nonsense and I was sitting on the arm of the couch watching you, and I thought this is what it would be like. Coming home to you. Hearing your voice wind down at the end of the day. I pulled the blanket up to your chin and Goose put his head on your chest, and I stood in my kitchen for 10 minutes drinking water. I didn't need, because I couldn't go to bed with you 20 feet away and not next to me. I closed that letter and pressed my palms flat against the carpet and breathed the way you breathe when the ground shifts and you need to feel something solid. The angry letters came next in the timeline. I found 3 of them from the summer 2 years in. When Megan and I were at our worst, and I was calling Nadia almost every day to talk about it, one of them started, "You called me today to ask if Megan was being unreasonable or if you were. And I sat on my kitchen floor and told you what you wanted to hear because that's what I do. I'm the friend, I'm the bench. I'm the person you call when you need someone to say it's going to be okay. And I say it every time, and I mean it every time. And every time I hang up, I feel like I'm handing you back to someone who doesn't know what she has." She didn't sign that one, just stopped writing. Another one from the same period 3 days later, short. Just a few lines. "I'm tired of being good at this. I'm tired of being the person who loves you just right, close enough that you come back, far enough that you never look. I don't want to be your best friend anymore." That sentence was crossed out so hard the pen tore through the paper. Below the tear she'd written, "I don't mean that. I'll always want to be whatever you let me be. I just wish you'd let me be more." I sat with that one for a long time. Goose came into the bedroom round. Then, his nails clicking on the hardwood. He stood next to me and put his nose against the letter, in my hand sniffing it the way dogs do when they can tell something important is happening, but can't figure out what. I scratched behind his ears. He leaned into my hand. I wondered how many times he'd watched her sit in this same spot, writing these same letters, feeling this same thing. Dogs know. They don't understand the specifics, but they know. I put the letters back and got up and took Goose for his morning walk. The park was quiet. Wednesday mornings are slower because the families with kids don't come until the weekend. It was mostly the regulars, Frank with his terrier. The woman whose name I never learned who walks 2 gray dogs that look identical. Frank saw me and waved. "Where's Nadia?" "Michigan, visiting her parents." "You two are joined at the hip," he said. He said it the way people say things they think are obvious, like stating the weather. "She'll be back soon?" "Few more days." "Good, tell her we miss her. Benny misses Goose." Benny was the terrier. Benny did not appear to miss Goose. Benny was eating grass. I sat on the bench, my side, the right side. I looked at the left side and tried to count how many mornings we'd sat there. 4 years, 5 or 6 mornings a week, over 1,000. More than 1,000 mornings, and I'd never once thought about why she always had my coffee ready before I asked. Never thought about why she remembered every detail of every relationship I complained about, every client who frustrated me, every offhand thing I said about a book or a movie or a song. I thought it was because she was a good listener. She was a good listener, but good listening has a reason, and the reason was in a shoebox in her closet, and I'd been sitting next to it for 4 years. The bench felt different now. Everything did. The whole park looked like evidence. I went back to her apartment, made coffee, sat at her kitchen table and opened my laptop and tried to work. I had a logo due Friday for a craft brewery in Portland, and I stared at the screen for 40 minutes and moved nothing. Because I kept noticing things. The photo on her fridge. I'd seen it 100 times and never really looked. It was from a summer barbecue at Marcus's place 2 years ago. Nadia and I standing next to the grill. She was laughing, full lean back, hand on her cheek. I was holding a spatula and looking at her like she was the funniest person alive, which she probably was. She'd kept that photo, magnet and everything, centered on the fridge, not tucked in a corner. I stood in front of it with my coffee and noticed that my mug wasn't mine. It was a blue ceramic mug with a chip on the handle that I'd been drinking from every morning at her apartment this week. I opened her cabinet. There were 6 mugs. The blue one was separate from the others, on its own shelf, pushed to the front, like it was waiting. She had a mug set aside for me. She'd probably put it there years ago. I'd been drinking from it for 3 days and hadn't noticed. I noticed now. Her laptop was on the kitchen counter, plugged in, and when I moved my own laptop to make room, I bumped the trackpad and her screen lit up. I wasn't snooping. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't going through her things. But the screen was right there, and the first thing I saw was a Spotify playlist called Park Days. 47 songs. I recognized the artist from her car. The songs she'd play on the drive from the coffee shop to the park, early mornings, windows down when the weather was warm. She'd made a playlist for our mornings. named it and saved it and listened to it and never mentioned it. I closed the laptop screen and sat down and put my face in my hands, and Goose put his chin on my foot under the table. I think that's when the wonder turned into something heavier. Not guilt, not exactly. Something closer to vertigo, like standing at the edge of something tall and looking down and realizing the ground is much further away than you thought. She had built a whole quiet architecture around me. The mug, the photo, the playlist, the letters. A second version of our friendship that ran parallel to the one I knew, and hers was deeper and lonelier and more honest. Marcus came by Thursday evening. I hadn't asked him to come. He just showed up, which is his way. He brought a six-pack and stood in Nadia's doorway looking around like he was seeing the apartment for the first time. "So this is where you've been hiding." "I'm dog-sitting." "You're spiraling. You sound like you did when Megan left, except worse because this time you're not sure if you should be upset or happy." He sat on the couch. Goose immediately climbed on him. Marcus let it happen, which is how I know he's a good person, because 70 pounds of golden retriever in your lap is a commitment. I told him about the letters. Not all of them, but the ones that stuck. The one about her hand shaking, the one about the blanket, the angry one where the pen went through the paper. Marcus listened the way Marcus listened, still and quiet, eyes on his beer, turning it over in his head. "You know what killed my marriage," he said after a while. "You've told me." "No, I've told you the version. The version is that we grew apart. The version is that two people who got married too young realized they wanted different things." He took a drink. "The real thing is simpler. I saw it. The whole time I saw exactly what Julie was and what she needed, and I told myself I'd say something tomorrow. Every day was going to be the day. And then one day she was packing and I was standing in the kitchen, and I realized I'd been so busy planning to say it that I never said it." He looked at me. "How many letters?" 43. 3 years of saying it on paper because she couldn't say it out loud. Sound familiar to anyone? It did. It sounded like Marcus, standing in his kitchen watching Julie fold sweaters into boxes. "I don't know how I missed it," I said. "You didn't miss it. You chose not to see it. There's a difference. Missing it means the signs weren't there. You're telling me there's a photo on the fridge and a mug in the cabinet and 43 letters in a shoebox. The signs were everywhere. You just weren't ready." We sat with that. Goose shifted in Marcus's lap. The apartment was quiet except for the sound of traffic outside and Goose breathing. "What are you going to do?" Marcus said. "She gets back Sunday." "That's not what I asked." "I know." He left around 9, hugged me at the door, which Marcus doesn't do often, so it meant something. I stood in the hallway listening to his car start and pull away, and then I went back inside and sat on the couch with Goose and did not turn on the television and did not open my laptop and did not do anything except sit there in Nadia's apartment, surrounded by all the things she'd arranged around the shape of me. I went back to the shoebox. I'd read maybe 30 of the 43 by then, spread across 3 days, and I'd been circling the ones near the past, the recent ones. They were quieter than the middle letters. The anger had burned out. What replaced it was something that scared me more. Sadness, but not the kind that comes from losing something. The kind that comes from accepting that you never had it. The most recent letter was dated 2 weeks before she left for Michigan. 2 weeks before she handed me her key and told me Goose needs his walk by 7. The handwriting was steady, without a single crossed-out word or torn edge. She'd stopped fighting with herself. It started the same way they all did. "Dear Ethan," and then she wrote the thing that changed everything. "I've decided this is the last one. Not because I don't love you. I think we both know that's not going to stop, but because I've been writing to a version of you that lives in these pages, and he's not real. The real you is out there, and he deserves to hear it from me, not from a piece of paper. I'm going to tell you when I get back from Michigan. I don't know how. I don't know what words. But I'm going to sit on our bench, and I'm going to say the thing I've spent 3 years writing around. Whatever happens after that is whatever happens. I'm tired of letters. I want the actual sentence, the real one, said out loud to your face." I put the letter down. Goose was asleep in the doorway, his legs stretched out behind him. Outside it was dark. Thursday night, and she'd be home in 3 days, and when she walked through that door she was planning to tell me what 43 letters had been trying to say. And I realized the vertigo I'd been feeling all week wasn't about the letters. It wasn't about what she felt. It was about what I was going to feel when she said it out loud, standing in front of me, with no paper between us. Because letters you can put back in a box. Letters you can close a lid on. But words, spoken words, the kind she was planning to say on our bench with Goose at our feet, those don't go back. Once she says it, I have to answer. And answering means knowing what I feel, and knowing means I can't stand in the safe middle anymore. Can't stay in the place where she's my best friend, and that sentence doesn't need an asterisk. 3 days. She was coming home in 3 days, carrying the one sentence I wasn't sure I was ready to hear. Except I couldn't stop doing the math. Day 5, Friday morning. I woke up on Nadia's couch with Goose, lying across my legs like a 70-pound heating blanket, and the first thing I thought wasn't coffee or work or the brewery logo I still hadn't finished. The first thing I thought was the bookstore, Rena, 3 years ago. I'd told Nadia about Rena, the way you tell your best friend about a girl. I was excited and dumb about it, going on about how she'd written her number on the receipt and how her handwriting was small and neat, and I thought that meant something. Nadia smiled and said I should text her that night. Nadia went home and sat in her car for 15 minutes because her hands wouldn't stop shaking. I lay on the couch staring at the ceiling and started going through every single one. Not the letters this time, but the memories. All 4 years of them, one after another, like flipping through a deck of cards and realizing every card had the same face on it. The weekend I broke up with Megan. Nadia came over with soup she'd made from scratch and a movie she said she'd been meaning to watch. She sat on the far end of the couch and kept her distance, and I thought she was just being respectful, giving me space. Now I looked at that night and saw a woman sitting 6 feet from the person she loved, measuring every inch, making sure she wasn't too close, making sure I couldn't feel what she was holding. The time she helped me move. We painted my living room until 3 in the morning. She had a streak of gray paint across her cheek, and she was sitting on the floor laughing because I'd painted one wall a slightly different shade and didn't notice until we finished. I remember looking at her and thinking I am so lucky to have a friend like this. That was the word I used, friend. Like I was filing her in the right cabinet and closing the drawer. Every birthday she remembered, not just the date but the thing I mentioned once in passing months before. A first edition of a book I'd said I liked at a bookstore we passed during a walk. She tracked it down, wrapped it in brown paper, didn't make a big deal out of it, handed it to me on the bench like it was nothing, and I said, Nadia, this is too much. And she said, it's just a book, Ethan. And I didn't hear what she was really saying, that it was never about the book. The night she drove me home from the bar, I was drunk and rambling, and she drove my car because I couldn't. She took me to her apartment because it was closer. I fell asleep on her couch mid-sentence, and she covered me with a blanket and put water and aspirin on the table. I'd read her letter about that night. She stood in her kitchen for 10 minutes afterward, drinking water she didn't need, because she couldn't go to bed with me 20 feet away and not next to her. All of it. Every dinner, every walk, every time she said her loss about whatever girl didn't work out. Every time I called her at midnight because I was sad or bored or lonely, and she picked up on the second ring, always the second ring. Never the first, because that would have looked too eager. Never the third, because she couldn't wait that long. I counted the times she'd said, I'm happy for you. When I started dating Megan. When I got the big client in Seattle. When I told her Megan and I were talking about moving in together. Each time that same careful smile, the one where her mouth moved right but something behind her eyes stayed still. I thought it was just her face. Some people smile like that. I'd believed that for 4 years. It wasn't just how she smiled. Goose needed his walk. I clipped the leash and we went to the park, and I sat on the bench, my side, and watched the morning happen around me. Frank wasn't there. The woman with the 2 gray dogs wasn't there. It was just me and Goose, and a guy throwing a tennis ball for a Labrador across the field. My phone rang. Nadia. My chest did something it doesn't usually do. This tight, pulling thing right below my sternum. I picked up. Hey, she said. Hey. How's Goose? Is he eating okay? He gets weird about the wet food sometimes. He's eating fine. He's right here. Tell him I miss him. I looked at Goose. He was lying in the grass, ears forward, watching a squirrel. He says he misses you too. She laughed. The real kind. The full lean back with her hand on her chest, and I could hear it through the phone the same way I'd heard it 1,000 times on the bench. How's Michigan? I said because I had to say something. Because the alternative was silence, and silence on the phone with Nadia was something I'd never been afraid of until now. Good. My mom tried to reorganize my old bedroom and found my 6th grade yearbook. I wrote future journalist under my photo, so that worked out great. Editor at a cookbook press is close enough. Close enough, sure. Today I helped her make pierogi from her grandmother's recipe. We made like 100 of them. I can't feel my fingers. She sounded normal. She sounded like Nadia. And that was what killed me, sitting there, on the bench, holding the phone to my ear. She sounded like the person I'd known for 4 years telling a funny story about her mom's kitchen, and I had to pretend I didn't know what was underneath all of it. I had to match her tone and ask the right follow-up questions, and laugh when she said something about her dad falling asleep during a movie, and the whole time I was holding the shoebox in my head, all 43 letters stacked on top of each other, and she had no idea. "You okay? You sound quiet." "I'm fine, just tired." "You sure?" "Yeah, tell your mom I said hi." "I will. She likes you. She keeps asking when you're going to visit." "One of these days." "She means it, Ethan. She's not just being polite." "I know." We hung up. I put my phone on the bench next to me and pressed my palms flat on the wood and breathed. Goose came over and put his head on my knee, looking up at me with those patient brown eyes. I scratched behind his ears. He leaned into my hand. I went back to her apartment and sat at the kitchen table and opened a drawer and pulled out a piece of paper. White and lined, the kind she uses for her letters. "Dear Nadia," I wrote. I stared at those 2 words for a long time. Then I put the pen down, because I didn't know what came next. I'd never had to name what she was to me. She was Nadia. She was the bench, and the coffee, and the phone calls, and the person I didn't have to explain myself to. She was the one I called first, about everything, always. All the background of my life, except she wasn't background at all. She was the whole frame. I'd just been too close to see the edges. I picked the pen back up and tried. I wrote 3 sentences, read them, crossed them out, and started again. Wrote 2 more and crossed those out too. The words kept coming out wrong, too big or too small, too much like something or not enough like anything. I didn't know how to tell someone what they meant to me when I'd spent 4 years not knowing it myself. It's easy to say I love you when you felt it building, when you can point to a first date, a first kiss, a moment where everything clicked. It's different when the feeling was always there, and you just refused to look at it. There's no origin story for something that didn't begin. It just was, and I never noticed, and that's the part I couldn't write around. I crumpled the paper and threw it in the trash. Goose watched me from his spot under the table, his chin on my foot, his tail doing one slow wag. "I know," I said to him. "I know." Marcus called that evening. I was standing at Nadia's kitchen window, watching the streetlights come on, Goose asleep on the couch behind me. "Have you figured out what you're going to do?" he said. "No, hello, that's Marcus." "No." "She's coming back Sunday, right?" "Sunday." He was quiet for a few seconds. I could hear him breathing, the way he breathes when he's thinking about something that costs him more than he wants to let on. "I want to tell you something," he said, "and I don't want you to argue with me about it." "Okay." I knew about Julie for 2 years. Not guessed, but knew with certainty. I knew exactly how I felt, and I knew exactly what I should say, and I told myself I had time. Every morning I woke up next to her and I thought, today's the day. And then I'd make coffee and she'd go to work, and the day would pass and I'd tell myself tomorrow. And then one day she was packing boxes and I was standing in our kitchen, and the knowing was the thing I hated most. Not the divorce or the empty house. The knowing. Because I had the words the whole time, I just never said them. I didn't say anything. I couldn't, because I could hear it in his voice, the way it dropped at the end, this weight he'd been carrying for 2 years that never got lighter. "You're doing the same thing," he said. "You've got this window, and it's open right now, and you can either walk through it or stand there watching it close. It's not the same." "It's exactly the same. You know how you feel. You just don't want to be the one who says it first." I don't even know what I'd say. "Ethan." His voice got quiet, and I don't mean soft. Quiet is different, and the difference matters. You don't need the perfect words, you just need to say them while you still can. We sat on the phone for a while after that, not talking, the kind of silence Marcus and I have done since we were kids, the comfortable kind, except this one had an edge to it. Finally he said, "Call me Sunday after," and hung up. I put my shoes on and clipped Goose's leash and took him outside, not to the park this time, a different route. Down the block past the houses I didn't know, and through the neighborhood where the streetlights are farther apart and the sidewalks get quieter. If you've ever loved a person and been willing to say it, you already know the difference between those two things. You can carry the feeling for years without it being heavy. Love is easy to hold. It's warm and it sits in the center of your chest, and you can live with it indefinitely, this comfortable shape that doesn't ask anything of you. Saying it is different. Saying it means you've taken the thing out of your chest and put it in your hands and held it out in front of you where someone else can see it, where someone can touch it or drop it. You can love someone in perfect safety for your whole life. You can never get hurt. All it costs you is the truth. Goose walked ahead of me, sniffing mailboxes, tail steady. The night was warm for late spring. I could hear crickets somewhere beyond the houses, and a car passed us slowly, its headlights sliding across the trees. I thought about Nadia's letters, the angry ones from the middle, the one where the pen tore through the paper. She'd written, "I'm tired of being good at this. Tired of being the person who loves you just right, close enough that you come back, far enough that you never look." She'd been carrying the saying for 3 years. 3 years of holding it out in her hands on paper, where I couldn't see it. And I'd been holding mine too. I just hadn't written any letters. I hadn't even admitted there was something to hold. If you're the kind of person who stays up too late listening to stories like this, you should probably subscribe. Just saying. My phone buzzed at 9:14 that night. I was back at Nadia's apartment, sitting at her kitchen table, staring at the second blank piece of paper I'd pulled from the drawer. A text from Nadia. "Hey, change of plans. My mom's neighbor had a plumbing emergency and she wants to deal with it herself, so she's kicking me out a day early. My flight lands tomorrow evening around 7. Is that okay? Can you stay with Goose until then? Tomorrow evening instead of Sunday. 1 day less than I thought I had." I typed back that of course I could stay, no rush. 3 dots appeared on my screen, then disappeared, then appeared again. "Thanks, E, you're the best. See you tomorrow." I put my phone down on the table next to the blank piece of paper. Goose was lying at my feet, his body warm against my ankles. The apartment was quiet. Her apartment, her couch, her photo on the fridge, her mug in the cabinet, her playlist on the laptop. All the architecture she'd built around me, and tomorrow she'd be standing inside it, and she was going to say the sentence, and I was going to have to answer. I picked up the pen, put it down, and picked it up again. Goose shifted at my feet. Outside, a car horn somewhere down the block. Then nothing but the hum of her refrigerator and the sound of my own breathing. I sat at Nadia's kitchen table with a blank piece of paper and a pen I couldn't make myself use, and I thought about Marcus standing in his kitchen watching Julie pack boxes. I thought about knowing and not saying, about the window and how long it stays open, about the difference between holding something safe in your chest and holding it out where it can break. Tomorrow evening, 22 hours, give or take. I smoothed the paper flat with both hands. Goose put his chin on my foot, and I wrote 2 words at the top of the page. Dear Nadia. Dear Nadia. I stared at those 2 words the same way I'd stared at them an hour ago, except now they looked different. Less like a greeting, and more like a door I was standing in front of with my hand on the knob. I didn't write a love letter. I want to be clear about that. I didn't write the kind of thing you see in movies. The 3-page outpouring where the guy suddenly finds exactly the right words at exactly the right moment, and the music swells and everything lands perfectly. That's not how it works. At least, not for me. Not at 2 in the morning at someone else's kitchen table with a duck's sleep on my feet and a pen that was almost out of ink. What I wrote was short, maybe half a page. I told her I found the shoebox. I told her I read the letters, not all of them at first, but eventually all of them. I told her I was sorry for reading something that wasn't meant for me, and then I crossed that out because it was meant for me. Every word of it. She wrote my name 43 times at the top of 43 pages, and that's about as meant for me as something can get. I told her about the mug. The blue one with the chip on the handle, how I'd been drinking from it for a week and didn't notice it was separate from the others until I noticed everything. I told her about the photo on the fridge, how I finally looked at the way I was looking at her in it. I told her about the playlist Park Days, 47 songs I recognized from her car with the windows down on warm mornings. Then I got to the part that mattered. I wrote, I don't know when it started. I think that's what scares me. With other people there was always a beginning, a first date, a moment you could point to. With you it's like asking when I started breathing. I don't remember deciding to. I just looked down one day and realized I'd been doing it the whole time. That's not poetry. It's barely a complete thought. But it was the truest thing I'd put on paper in my life, and when I wrote it my hand was shaking, not a lot. Just enough that the letters tilted slightly, leaning left the way hers do. I didn't sign it love. I signed it just Ethan. Because love would have been too neat, too much like an ending when what I wanted was a beginning. I folded the letter once, then twice. I went to the bedroom closet and took the shoebox down from the shelf and placed my letter on top of the stack, face up, so it would be the first thing she'd see when she opened the lid. Then I put the lid back on and put the box back on the shelf and closed the closet door and stood there in the dark of her bedroom and breathed. Goose was watching me from the doorway, his head tilted the way Goldens do when they're trying to figure out why you're standing in the dark doing nothing. I knelt down, and he came to me, pressing his head into my chest, and I held him for a minute. His fur smelled like the park, like grass, and that particular warm dog smell that isn't quite clean but isn't wrong either. Nadia's whole life smelled like Goose, her couch, her car, her coat. I'd never thought about how much I liked that smell until right then. "She's coming home," I told him. He wagged once, slow and heavy, he knew. I didn't sleep much. Maybe 2 hours. I lay on her couch with my feet hanging off the end because I'm too tall for it, and stared at the ceiling and listened to Goose breathe, and thought about what I hadn't said in the letter. The things that were too big, or too close, or too recent to name. Like the fact that I'd called her first after Charlie died. Like the fact that Megan once said, "You talk about Nadia more than you talk about us," and I told her she was being jealous and I believed it. Like the fact that when I imagine my life 5 years from now, Nadia's in every version, sitting on the left side of the bench with her coffee held in both hands, even when it's warm, and I never questioned why that image was the one that felt like home. I got up at 6, fed Goose, made coffee in her kitchen, in the blue mug with the chip on the handle, and drank it standing at the window. The morning was gray, soft light, the kind that makes everything look like a photograph someone forgot to develop. I cleaned her apartment. Not because it was dirty, but because I needed my hands to do something. I washed the dishes, wiped the counters, swept the floor under the kitchen table where Goose drops crumbs from his food bowl. I straightened the couch cushions. I folded the blanket I'd been using and put it on the arm of the couch the way she keeps hers. Small things, the kind of things you do when you're trying to put a space back the way you found it, even though nothing about how you found it is the same anymore. I took Goose to the park one last time. Not last as in forever. Last as in this version. The version where I sit on this bench as a man who doesn't know. The park was quiet. Saturday morning, early enough that the regulars hadn't come yet. I sat in my spot the right side, and Goose lay in the grass at my feet in Charlie's old spot. The bench was cold from the night. I put my hands flat on the wood and looked at the left side, Nadia's side, and tried to remember the first morning we sat here together. I couldn't find it. Not the date, not the weather, not what we talked about. It just blended into every other morning, the way things do when they become part of you without permission. I sat there for a long time, an hour, maybe more. Goose didn't rush me. He lay in the grass and watched the birds and occasionally lifted his head when someone walked past, then put it back down. Patient in the way only dogs can be patient, without resentment, without counting the minutes. Around 11 I walked back to her apartment. I checked the closet one more time. The shoebox was where I'd left it, my letter on top. I closed the door and went to the kitchen and sat down. I pulled out my phone, opened a text to Marcus, typed 3 words. I wrote one. He responded in under a minute. Good, now don't leave. That was it. No long message, no follow-up questions. Marcus knew what I wrote one meant the same way he knew what I found something had meant on Tuesday. Because Marcus had spent 2 years knowing what he should say and never saying it, and he could hear the sound of someone finally picking up the pen. I put my phone away. The apartment was clean, the letter was in the box. Goose was on the couch full and walked in content. There was nothing left to do except wait. I thought about leaving, not running, not escaping. Just leaving the key on the counter, texting her that everything went fine, going home to my apartment 12 minutes away and sitting in my own quiet and letting whatever happened happen at a distance. That would have been the safe thing. The version of this where nobody has to stand in front of anyone and be seen. I stayed. I stayed because of Marcus standing in his kitchen, watching Julie pack boxes. Because of the knowing. The knowing is the thing he hated most, he said. Not the divorce, not the empty house. The knowing. He had the words and he never said them. And now he lives in a house too big for one person because the garage has good light. I didn't want good light. I wanted to be in the room when she opened the door. Her flight landed at 7. By 6:45 I was sitting on her couch with Goose beside me, and my hands in my lap, and my heart doing something fast and irregular that I kept trying to slow down by breathing. It didn't work. Breathing is automatic until you start thinking about it, and then it's the hardest thing in the world. I heard her car in the parking lot at 7:22, then footsteps on the stairs, then the key in the lock. Goose was off the couch before the door was halfway open. He hit her at full speed, all 70 pounds tail blurring, the same way he'd hit Charlie that first morning at the park 4 years ago. She dropped her bag and knelt down and caught him, and he was licking her face and she was laughing. The real kind, the full, lean-back kind, except she was on her knees, so it was more of a full lean-back on her heels kind, and her hand was on his neck, and her face was in his fur, and she said, "I missed you, I missed you, I missed you," like it was one word. Then she looked up and saw me. I was standing by the couch. I don't remember standing up. My hands were at my sides and I wasn't smiling, and I think she knew the second she saw my face, because something in her expression shifted. Not a lot, just enough. The way the light changes when a cloud moves, and the room gets one shade darker, and you feel it before you see it. "Hey," she said, still kneeling, her arms around Goose. "Hey." She stood up slowly. Goose pressed against her leg, looking between us, tail still going but slower now. She was wearing a gray sweater I recognized, and her hair was up, with something I couldn't see from across the room, and she looked exactly like Nadia. Exactly like 4 years of mornings and coffee and bench, and every version of her I'd ever known, and also nothing like any of it, because I was seeing her now. "Did you find them?" she said. Not a question. Exactly. She didn't raise her voice at the end the way you do when you're asking. It was flat and quiet, and she said it looking right at me, and I could see the exact moment she stopped holding. "Yeah," I said. She closed her eyes. Just for a second, her jaw tightened and her hands went still, and she stood there in her doorway with her bag on the floor, and her dog against her leg, and the whole of what she'd been carrying for 3 years visible on her face for the first time. "How many?" she said. "All of them." She opened her eyes. They were wet, but she wasn't crying, not yet. She was holding it the way she holds everything, carefully, with both hands. "I was going to tell you," she said. "When I got back, I had a plan." "I know. I read that one, too." She almost smiled, almost. This small movement at the corner of her mouth that started and started again. "Of course you did." "I wrote you one," I said. Her face changed. I can't describe how. It was like watching someone hear a sound they'd been listening for so long they'd stopped believing it existed. Her chin dropped and her brow pulled together, and she said, "You what?" "It's in the box, on top." She looked toward the bedroom, then back at me. Her hand came up and pressed flat against her chest, the same gesture she makes when she laughs, but she wasn't laughing. She was just holding herself together. "I don't want to read it," she said, and her voice cracked on the last word. "I want you to tell me." The apartment was quiet. Goose had moved to his spot by the couch and settled down, chin on his paws, watching us with the calm certainty that whatever was happening was going to be fine. The refrigerator hummed. The light in the kitchen was the warm kind, yellow, the kind that makes everything look like the end of a long day. "I don't have the right words," I said. "I tried. I sat at your table for 3 hours, and I tried to figure out when it started, and I couldn't, because I don't think it started. I think it was always there, and I wasn't looking." She was crying now. Quiet tears, no sound, just her face, and the way she held it still like she was afraid of moving. "I'm looking now," I said. She crossed the room, not fast, not slow. She sat down next to me on the couch, close enough that her shoulder pressed against mine, and she didn't say anything, and I didn't say anything. And Goose sighed the way dogs sigh when the people they love are finally in the same room and he can stop keeping watch. We sat there for a long time, her shoulder against mine, the apartment settling around us the way it always had, except now I could feel it, all of it. The mug, the photo, the playlist, the letters, the bench. The 4 years of mornings and phone calls and coffee orders, remembered after being told once. The whole quiet architecture she'd built, and me finally inside it with my eyes open. She put her hand on the couch cushion between us, palm up, not reaching, just open. I put my hand in hers. Her fingers closed around mine and she exhaled. This long, slow breath that sounded like she'd been holding it for 3 years. And maybe she had. Maybe she'd been holding it since March 9th, since the bookstore girl, since the day her hands shook in her car. "I'm scared," she said. "Me too. I don't know how to do this." "I don't either." And that was enough. Not a kiss, not a declaration, not a grand resolution where everything clicks and the future becomes clear. Just two people sitting on a couch with a dog at their feet. Holding hands, being honest for the first time. Not pretending. That was the whole thing. Not pretending. I texted Marcus later, after Nadia had gone to shower and Goose had relocated to his bed, and the apartment had settled into a new kind of quiet. Not empty quiet, the kind I'd gotten used to in my own apartment since Megan. This was the other kind. Full quiet. "She's home," I typed. I stayed. 3 dots. "Then I know you did." He didn't need to say more. I could hear everything else in those 4 words. The things he wished he'd done differently, and the part of him that was glad I didn't have to wish the same. Seeing something that was always there doesn't change you. Not really. Admitting you see it does. It's admitting you see it. You can look at a thing for years, let your eyes pass over it every morning, and as long as you never name it, it stays safe and shapeless. You can keep it in the background where it doesn't ask anything of you. But the moment you say it out loud, it becomes real, and real things take up space. Real things ask you to make room, to change the arrangement of your life and let something in that you can't control. Courage is supposed to be the big stuff. Jumping from a building, running toward a fire, taking the risk everyone else is afraid of. Maybe sometimes it is, but sitting on a couch in a clean apartment in a warm kitchen with the person who's been right next to you for 4 years, the person who wrote your name 43 times and never said it aloud, and saying, "I'm looking now," saying, "I see you," saying, "I don't know how to do this, but I want to." That's the version of courage nobody warns you about. The quiet kind, the kind that doesn't come with music or a montage, the kind that just sits there, holding your hand, waiting for you to stop pretending. Nadia came back from the shower in an old t-shirt and sat down next to me and tucked one leg underneath her the way she does on the bench. And Goose lifted his head and looked at us and put it back down. Neither of us said anything for a while. We didn't need to. We'd been sitting in silence together for 4 years. We were good at it. The only difference was that this time, neither of us was pretending it was enough. If this story stayed with you, there are more like it on the channel.